Welcome back everybody to another MOTOBOB video, and now we know most of the major motorcycle releases ahead of the 2024 model year, but here are the ones that I'm specifically really looking forward to riding and reviewing based upon how interesting I think that experience is going to be. So let's go through them in order of excitement levels ascending. Now BMW recently pulled the covers off their new R12 Cruiser at Motorcycle Live, and effectively what we've got is a smaller capacity version of their R18 Cruiser lineup. And the thing is, while the R18 is kind of impressive in that they've managed to establish this big lineup of cruisers and tourers in an attempt to get some sales off Harley in the massively lucrative US market, practically and physically, those bikes are absolutely massive. The most stripped back standard R18 tips the scales at 345 kilograms, and a fully decked out R18 Transcontinental is a whopping 427 kilograms. And on top of that, they're super long as well. Think of a GS, which is already a pretty big bike. The Transcontinental is another 40-ish centimeters on top of that. So while that might be fine for big, wide, long, straight roads, for your average UK B road or A road, it's a little bit on the cumbersome side. The R12, however, should offer some of the same vibes with the flat boxer twin and the BMW design style, but at 227 kilograms, it's a lot more in line with the size of bike that I think is suited to our kind of roads. Also, the price looks a lot more attainable at £11,999, and it still makes 95 horsepower, which is pretty punchy for a mid-cruiser. Now onto the Triumph 400s, which absolutely had to be on this list, because they seem to tick a lot of boxes. I mean, 40 horsepower sounds like it should be enough for a slender 170 kilogram curb weight, and then you've also got a decent looking chassis spec, the styling is great as well, and also the price is absolutely on point. The Speed 400 comes in at £4,995 and the Scrambler 400X at $5,595. So you're almost down towards sort of Enfield 350 kind of money, and yet the Triumphs look, at least on paper, like they'll be a lot more fun to ride. It's almost the perfect balance between some of the classic looks of the Enfield, but with the much more modern performance of something like a KTM 390 Duke. So I really want to find out if they're as good as they look out on the road, and also if it's a genuine option if you want a Bonneville but perhaps can't afford one, or are they just some sort of cheap imitation? Now another bike that absolutely had to be on the list is the BMW R1300 GS, which is probably the most significant bike launch ahead of 2024, purely for the sheer number of them sold. It's almost always the best-selling big bike in the UK, especially if you combine the figures for the regular GS and the Adventure version, and so of course naturally then it's right towards the top of the list of bikes to review. But the other thing is that there's so much to talk about with it. There's a brand new engine with a bunch more power, a brand new chassis that gets rid of a lot of weight, a significantly reworked suspension system which should give it better handling and better ride quality, and then there's all the radar enabled tech which should massively change the riding experience over long distances. Then there's all the little extras and accessories which BMW more often than not fit to their press bikes, and so there's so much ground to cover, and that's why I'm really looking forward to getting my teeth into it. Equally though, it might not have quite the same broad appeal, but I'm very interested in the new F900 GS. You see, the previous gen F850 GS was a little bit anonymous. It didn't really have one thing that stood out about it, and so you wouldn't often think of it amongst the best middleweight adventure bikes. But this year, they've really spiced it up and they've given it a much more off-road focused image that should help it compete with the likes of the KTM 890 Adventure and potentially, to some extent, the Yamaha Tenere. You see, there's more power, there's better suspension, there's less weight, and also better ergonomics for standing. And then wrapped around it, you've got this new visual treatment with a completely different front end and also a massively slimmed out tail section that I think makes it look a lot more rugged and aggressive. So this really could be a proper contender in the middleweight adventure market. Now also on the adventure front, we've got the new Moto Guzzi V100 Stelvio, and I don't expect this to be as much of a serious off-roader, but it still massively appeals to me for the sort of adventure touring type riding. You see, naturally it's got loads in common with the V100 Mandello, which we tested earlier this year, and I really liked a lot of stuff about it. The engine has plenty of punch, but it still has that typical Moto Guzzi feel, and the handling is really quite sweet. but it is billed as a bit of a sports tourer, and while the wind protection from the electronically adjustable screen was decent, I just found the foot peg position to be a bit more on the sporty side, and so probably wouldn't choose this bike to ride over big mileages. The Stelvio though, well, it gets a lot of the same good stuff. So the engine, the tech package, I guess some of the chassis is heavily related as well, but it's just in this much more spacious adventure bike form factor that really should give it a much longer reach down to the pegs. Then you get some decent tech too with the radars front and rear, and also the looks. It has to be one of the best looking adventure bikes on the market, so this should be a good one. Now at 6, I've got the new Honda CB1000 Hornet, and I know it might not look quite as detailed and premium with the design features versus the CB1000R that it either sits alongside or replaces, but if you look at the componentry and the engine, it actually looks like it's going to be largely the same. In fact, they even say it's got a bit more punch from this inline 4 that's derived from a more recent Fireblade engine, and then the suspension, the brakes, the general size of the bike all look comparable. It's just a bit less bling looking. You don't have the fancy subframe or the single-sided swing arm or the really nice looking wheels, but the plus side is that means it should be much more affordable, and so I'm expecting it to be just as good to ride, but at a lower price point. Now, a couple of techie ones, it's always interesting to try out some of the brand new developments on the market, and there's none more innovative than the hybrid Kawasaki bikes, be that the Z Naked or the Ninja Sports Bike. You see, they've also released some 10-ish horsepower electrics for city riding, but I kind of know what to expect from those bikes. It's just going to be a gentle, quiet ride that's perfect for hopping around town, but the sensation of blending that electric power with a 500cc parallel twin will be completely new to me, as it's got me wondering whether it's actually a good thing. Maybe you'll get the benefit of the quiet and cool electric motor when you're riding in city traffic at low speeds, but then also the fun and the range of a petrol engine once things pick up a bit. So you see, technically, it sounds pretty good to me, and also there are a bunch of riding modes to test out, and it's got an automatic gearbox, so again, it should make it quite different and interesting to ride. Another new idea comes from Honda with their e-clutch system that can now be fitted to the CB650 Naked or the CBR650R sports bike, and in practice it should be twist and go from a standstill, so no need to feather the clutch as you're moving off or pull it in as you come into a stop, and you can also shift up and down without having to touch the clutch lever either. Now, I mean, it is still there, you've still got the manual clutch lever if you want to use it for super low speed riding, but otherwise it should be optional. Now, I must stress, this isn't a fully automatic job like the dual clutch transmission, for example. You still have to use the shifter with your left foot, but the big upside is that it's going to be a lot less complex, a lot less expensive, and also it'll be easier to redesign their existing engines to incorporate it. So presuming it sells well on these 650s, expect to see it on a lot more Hondas in future. Now, I've been praising the styling on this bike ever since it was announced a month or two back, and I think it looks fantastic, especially after seeing it at a couple of shows last month like EICMA and Motorcycle Live. But what about the riding? Well, the reason I think it could be an interesting one is that Yamaha have been rumored to be making an R9 sports bike for absolutely ages now. So basically a sporty version of their MT09 Naked, and yet it still hasn't come to fruition. But this, the XR900 GP with the half fairing or the full fairing if you go for the racer accessory kit, but also with the low clip-on bars, well, it's probably the closest you can get to a CP3 powered sports bike for now. The MT09, in my opinion, is already a great bike to ride, but does a more aggressive, sporty riding position suit it? Well, this will be the way to find out. But nothing to me looks quite as exciting for next year as the new Ducati Hypermotard 698. It looks like it's absolutely got it all. There's a brand new single-cylinder engine that makes about 77 horsepower. It's super lightweight at 151 kilograms wet. There's absolutely bags of tech, including a wheelie system that helps you maintain a wheelie, Brembo brakes, Marzocchi suspension, and the looks are absolutely beautiful too. And so it should be a blast, and the only potential barrier to enjoyment will be the seat height, which is up at 904 millimeters or a more generous 889 with the low seat accessory. Now, to be fair, that tallness is totally totally typical of the supermoto genre, and while it might not suit my particular stature or lack of, I'm still willing to give it a go because it just looks so good. As always, I'd love to know which bike you'd pick, so do let me know down in the comments below. Also, I'll leave you with the full details of that new bike from Ducati in case you haven't seen it already, so do give it a click and give it a watch. Hit subscribe if you've not already if you want to see more of the latest motorcycle news like this right here on YouTube. Many thanks for watching today, and we'll see you in the next one.